listening to Never Off Duty. This episode, we've got Drew Ford back with us. It's been a few episodes, so it's good to have you back in the hot seat here.
Glad to be back.
And we are joined by Lieutenant Hall, who's does a bunch of really cool things with the Clay County Sheriff's Department, including narcotics, which, for those of you who've tuned in regularly, you know I always ask the snake question, which you'll get that. But that's just coming up. You're going to wonder what it is. But yeah, so there's some other things you do with internet, and so give us what you told me off mic.
So working for the Sheriff's Office, I'm a lieutenant, so I'm responsible for a couple different areas of investigation. One of my primary areas is narcotics investigations. I have 2 sergeants and 11 detectives currently assigned that conduct investigations. So they do all kinds of different things. The majority of their time is spent conducting surveillance, watching people to determine what's going on so they can make a case. We do buys, we do search warrants, we do execute arrest warrants and things of that nature. The other area that I cover is internet crimes against children, and I have a sergeant over there with 7 detectives, 4 of which are assigned as investigators, and 3 are assigned as computer forensics specialists.
Okay.
And 4 are assigned as investigators, handling specifically or primarily complaints about or allegations of child pornography on the internet or things of that nature.
You know, and I'll quick question about that because I'm a parent. So a little public service announcement, I guess, for people listening. So say you're on the web and you find something, is the best thing to do to call y'all and say, I know there's a takedown, a national takedown thing you can report to, but what's the best way to say, hey, I saw this on Facebook. I think this is something here.
Sure.
Who should they contact first?
Sure. So I would always say contact your local authorities first. Okay. Contact the sheriff's office at the non-emergency number. Typically a detective or a deputy will get back to you very quickly. And then it'll get assigned to a detective and kind of looked at to determine if it is a violation of the law and if it warrants further investigation. A lot of these investigations start from pictures that were taken overseas, and there's a national picture database of child pornography. So whenever a picture comes in that has child pornography and someone says, hey, this guy had this picture on his phone, he sent it to me, oftentimes the first goal is to determine, is there a live victim? So if there is, it's all hands on deck. We try to find that person.
That's great. Horrible that it happens, but I mean, it's good that that's the response that you'd hope for.
But then the secondary thing is it's a crime to have in your possession that child pornography. So whoever sends that picture is also committing a crime. The judges and the prosecutors take that crime very seriously, so that they actively investigate those as well. But always report it to your local authorities first, and then we'll address how to proceed at that point.
Oh, great. That's good to know. And so then we have that, and you have narcotics, and is there another...
No, those are the 3 primary.
Okay.
Now, we also have the computer forensics, which processes a lot of the information that comes in through my ICAC detectives, as well as other areas of the sheriff's office. They process cell phones and computers and computers inside cars to collect data for different investigations. But their primary focus is that.
Right.
And one thing to note, and Lieutenant Hall, tell me if this is really under your purview still, at least I can remember, because I don't know if we ever made mention before about K9 Ty, who, we have had now for, maybe a little over 3-4 years now.
That's correct.
And, I don't want to give it away, but can you tell can you tell what K9 Ty does and how he assists you guys?
And that's the police dog.
He is a police dog.
Because we were talking tech, and sometimes, I've noticed tech name stuff that you're like, this is the K9 Ty, and it could be like some weird computer program that does stuff. So I was hoping it was a dog. But
sure. It is a dog. Now, this is not your typical police dog. Most people think police dog is a German Shepherd. He's got growling teeth. He's going to go out here and chew people up. But this dog's not like that. This is, I think he's a Golden Lab. He's a very calm, docile dog, and he was actually not trained to detect bombs or narcotics. He was trained to detect electronic devices.
Oh, wow.
So how he assists is investigations. Everything gets smaller over the years. So used to be your cell phone was big, it had a bag, and it plugged it into your car. Most people listening, if they're younger than 40, don't remember.
I know.
that.
I'm 46,
Right,
so I do know
right.
what those are. We used to have them in my company.
As they get smaller and smaller, and people have some thumb drives and different ways of storing data, it's easier to hide that stuff.
Right.
And so the criminals know what they're doing when they're into this child pornography and such. And as a result of that, they try to hide it inside their house. So when we execute warrants, it's hard to find. The items are so small. We can look anywhere, but sometimes we just can't pinpoint it. And the dog helps at that. That's what he does. He's released into the house, and he'll sniff and find electronic devices. And I don't know exactly which substance he's sniffing for, but he is trained to detect thumb drives and items like that.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it really is amazing.
And when you think about it, because we remember the days when we had floppy disks, right? But now these SD cards, when they first came out, they were about this big. You still wouldn't be able to find them if someone hit them. But then now you even have SD cards that are just about, not even a full inch, that can be hidden. And so how do you try and find those things when, again, some of these criminals are so sophisticated that, they think they can hide those electronic devices, and Canine Tie is actually good at, helping us locate that.
That's correct.
That is amazing. And I'll tell you, I imagine this, I'm a little bit in tune with the tech world, and, it's one of those interesting things with encryption, because obviously it protects you innocent people from having bad things happen to them, but it also protects criminals.
Certainly.
I have a government friend who we were talking about government encryption and, the type of stuff that they can do. And I know it trickles down obviously NSA can do a lot more than local, but it still amazes me. I mean, when I'm hearing about new encryption technologies and it would take a good hacker, 8 million years to crack. And then you're like, okay, so the NSA could probably do it in a month, right. Doing that down there. But again, I mean, it's always an interesting conundrum of our rights and protections. And yet that real time, I think of the case in California where they were trying to potentially find a bomber. And it was like, and Apple had some stuff going on there because they've got good encryption. And again, I just, from sitting in my seat, it's such a complicated thing.
Nobody knows how that phone ever got open.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Well, I don't, who knows? Who knows? I have some theories. It's probably why they released a security update within a week.
Exactly right.
Exactly right. Yep.
After it. But it's an interesting world we live in. And I bet y'all are constantly having to adapt and change. And again, the frustration factor is probably the strongest when it's something live. And you reach that roadblock of, wow, we are, technology. I mean, it works both ways. Y'all have tools and they have tools. The bad guys have tools.
Sure.
So it's a constant game. I imagine, because when were you first a detective? I
actually started with the Green Cove Springs Police Department, my law enforcement career many years ago, 1995, I believe. Sounds about right. I did about 5 years with them, and then I came to the sheriff's office. During my 5 years with Green Cove, I was transferred over to the drug task force for Clay County. So I did about 3 years there. Then I came to the sheriff's office and did about another 8 or 9 years as a detective. So total about 11 years as a detective. But in the infancy, when I first started, we hardly had cell phones. Right. And it was nothing like it is now. And the drug world has changed. The cellular world obviously has changed. And obviously the internet capabilities and the capabilities of criminals to access and use that internet for bad purposes has changed.
Yeah. And so I always bring up TV and movies because that's something that laymen on the other side of the mic understand more, because we see more of that than we do that. And it's often horribly done, and I recognize that, so I like to bring it up and let you nitpick it. And you people, it's a horrible thing to say, but you know what I mean. I mean, that's the professionals nitpick it. But two examples, because I mentioned that I watched Narcos over there, but one of the funny things about that is when the show starts, they reference the fact that they started using cell phones when they weren't encrypted, and it was so easy. But they had to fly over it to get it. And then better example is probably The Wire. I don't know if you've ever seen that show.
Sure.
But
Greatest show in the world.
it is a great show. It is, and I've heard it's very accurate on many levels. Which is, if you watch the show, you'll understand.
Absolutely.
But there's because it not only does it deal with that, but the wire technology when it first started, it was in its infancy. Nobody knew what to do. It was wild, wild west, and then rules got put in place, and then it became incredibly difficult, and and then they found ways around it because that was it was this cat and mouse game, and it never stops. I mean, really,
Right.
where
It
you're
really
sitting-
doesn't. And, it's funny because in law enforcement, we've got rules to play by, right? So we do everything we can to play by the rules, and that puts us at such a huge disadvantage. But the truth of the matter is, if we're not going to win the right way, why are we playing?
Right.
So that is our job, is to play by the rules, do it right, and when we catch you, you're caught. Most of the times, these criminals don't take it personal. They understand it's their job to get away with it. It's our job to catch them, and they win more than they lose.
Wow,
But
that's a professional. I hate to say it, but it's like an NFL football player. There you go. Yeah, sometimes you lose,
But
sometimes you win. We train hard. And,
Lieutenant Hall really touched on it with the criminals. They realized, even back in '97 when I got hired with Philly Police in the drug game in the streets, and where they were standing on corners, and it was a cat and mouse game. And, it was their job to run when you rolled up. And, but when you caught them, it was all respect and, hey, you got me. It is what it is. And, either they try and go to court and beat the case. But the reality is, some of the rules have now changed as Tom has evolved. But, some of these criminals out here do understand it is a cat and mouse game. And we do have to play by the rules.
Right.
But that's what makes us the elite of what we're trying to do. And if that, you got to stay on top of the new technologies and keep up with training and definitely in narcotics, for their field and ICAC, a lot of those guys are trained, and receive training almost every year just to make sure they stay up and current on the latest drug information and then technologies, and then making sure we are doing it the right way.
Sure. So touching on that a little bit, in the drug world, a lot of our undercover operations rely on evidence, right?
right.
So it's no longer a police officer said this happened and that's the gospel and that's the end of it. I mean, we've seen what happened, in the larger cities, especially in the north and northeast and out west towards California and where all the riots were, where there are people out there who just, no matter what the police say, they don't believe them. So more and more we have to use our technology, which is ever developing and ever changing, to capture either video or audio evidence to prove what we're saying really did happen. It's frustrating sometimes, but that's the way it is. And it's our job to make a good case. And so we go as far as we can to capture, every deal on video, every deal on audio, multiple deals, videos from a helicopter, airplane, whatever we can do to really make sure the cases are prosecutable.
Well, that's great. And you have to. I mean, that's
Sure.
like you said, that is the world we live in now.
Yep.
That, you got to have, I guess it comes back from and we've seen it. You have the one person that wasn't really guilty, and they probably, my personal opinion, they probably just got away with it. But that's, I think there's various shades of innocence.
Well, you know what? But here's the thing, and I don't condone, folks who are out there selling drugs, because it does do harm. But, even, back in the 90s, the 80s, I'll be honest. I used to say, listen, if you did it and you made a lot of money, why didn't you take the time to get yourself out of that, start a business, try and put yourself through school? I'm not saying what they did was right. Or what they were doing were right. But a lot of times, a lot of these guys stay in this game too long, and that's how they end up getting caught, on top of other mistakes.
That's true, Andrew. And one of the things I when I was a detective and I talked to these potential informants that were going to help law enforcement with investigations, I always told them, I said, do you know any 50 or 60-year-old drug dealers?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're either in prison or they're dead.
No retirement or pension plan.
And even
there's a short-term future. It's unfortunate, but most of the drug dealers that we call it, at least the street level, the lower level, guys that are not really making much money, maybe making $1,000 a week, they're young guys, very young. And so I mean, I attribute it to their brains not being fully developed. They're just they're immature, and so all they see is that instant gratification of I want money right now. I want those shoes. I want that car with the rims. I want that stereo. I want these hot girls or whatever. I want to make a music video. They don't look at the future, and unfortunately, even if they change their life later on, now they've got a criminal history and they can't get away from it.
That's right.
So it makes it a lot harder later in life if they do decide to straighten out.
And I think, again, an excellent point there about you don't see old drug dealers. And that's the reality is, Hollywood does do movies about people like Narcos and all that. But if you watch it, it ends badly.
Right.
Even the ones, the quote unquote great ones, the ones that made history, it ends badly. And in fact, a lot of times, like using Pablo Escobar as an example, if you watch the show, now how accurate it is, I don't know, but yeah, there was a time when he had private jets and helicopters and owned a, and then there's times when he couldn't find a place to use the restroom, even though he was technically a kingpin.
Yes.
Right.
And on the run, and it's not a glorious life. Stay away.
It is not a glorious life. And if I can talk about a most recent show, when I say talk about it, just make mention, and not trying to prop it, but but it was a great show, and I still haven't gotten through it all. But a show called Snowfall.
Oh yeah,
where he's how he started out, and then when you get to the end to see how he finished, and again those realities of you never saw a retired drug dealer, or something happened to where either they're in jail or they got hooked on their own supply, so now they became addicted. All those things can happen to you. Even though they're movies or TV shows, but we also see it personally with guys who've gone to jail because they're selling drugs. It doesn't end well, for you. There's a very small percentage of folks who may have been able to get out that game and then, or may have been able to survive it long term. But I have to imagine it's a very small percentage.
And we've talked about this many times, but if you are smart enough to organize a criminal empire and run it, you're probably smart enough to start a legal
business.
go just you know how to do distribution. You are actually an asset to somebody that will pay you
Logistics.
a lot of money.
Yes, that's true. And these guys are smart, and I've had conversations with them. I'm like, why don't you do something legal with this? Because you've got a complete organization. These guys are so sharp and plan so well. They'll have a work car they'll park in a parking lot. They'll have a house that they sleep at. They'll drive a car from their house to that work car, get out, get in that work car, go to their storage units, go to their trap houses, sell dope all day, come back, get in their car, and go home. And they're home. They don't deal drugs there. Sometimes they keep drugs. Most of the time, they just keep the proceeds there. But they keep it totally insulated. So there's a huge effort in becoming a mid to upper level drug dealer, getting to that point. But once you're at that point, now you've got our attention.
Right.
And so it's a matter of time. We're pretty good at catching people. I imagine if there were any significant dealers listening to this podcast, they're probably saying, you won't catch me. But
Not true.
Keep looking over your shoulder because we're coming.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, take Sopranos, a show I also watched. And one of the things that always caught me off guard was I'm like, these are supposed to be very wealthy individuals, but yet they'll take a chair and sit at a work site all day long. And I'm like, you're putting a lot of effort into your, I'd rather do something else. Like it just doesn't make sense.
They're putting a lot of effort into not working.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, even what you were saying about they'll drive to work and park a car, and I'm like, you just wasted an hour of your day to do something, and an hour in the afafternoon, and I don't think you're earning enough money to make it worth that.
But that's the life. You're always looking over your shoulder.
Right.
Yeah, that's the biggest
thing. And there are significant proceeds to be made. I mean, we've had recent cases where there was very significant cash seizures. Oftentimes we don't get the cash because we're more interested in getting the drugs off the street. So I'll give you an example. We're doing a surveillance and we see an exchange of drugs for money and we can only go after one or the other. Well, we're going to let the money go and go after the drugs, right? It makes sense because the drugs nowadays, when I first started, drugs didn't typically kill people. Heroin was virtually unheard of in Clay County. My 9 or 10 years as a detective, I worked one heroin case. Fast forward, I get promoted. I come back to narcotics as a sergeant several years ago. Half of it's fentanyl. Mm-hmm. I mean, it boggled my mind. But the point I'm making is that we always try to take those drugs off the street, especially dangerous, deadly drugs such as fentanyl, which is very prevalent right now. We can't let that get away. And so we have to sacrifice the opportunity to grab the money and the drugs sometimes. And that's what we do. We go after the drugs.
Well, so talking about fentanyl, I'm assuming from everything that I know, that is the biggest problem right now as far as narcotics go.
It's definitely the most life-threatening, for sure. Right. It is very prevalent. Countywide, in this county, Clay County, we've had approximately 20 overdose deaths. We had one yesterday. I'm not sure if that individual passed away or not, but approximately 20 this year so far that are likely attributed to fentanyl. Of those 24 of them have come back confirmed as fentanyl toxicity or fentanyl combination with other drugs. The other ones don't come back. You know how it works is someone passes away, it goes to the medical examiners. It may take 30, 60, 90 days to get the results back from the tox. So if you just think if all 20 of those were indeed fentanyl, that's a significant number of people that are dying that don't need to, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and from what I understand, and y'all, again, you're the expert, so please chime in once I give what I remember hearing is, obviously a little bit of fentanyl can kill you, and it's highly addictive. Mm-hmm. And it obviously, and the bigger problem is I've heard, I think we talked about on the show, like you'll have a dealer lace it in something to try to get somebody addicted, or something like, I don't know. It just seems like, and it seems like we just keep growing. It's like, oh, there's meth. Oh, no, let's find something horribly worse, which that is horrible too. It's like 7 levels of hell of narcotics, of what they're trying to bring.
It is. I'll tell you the advent of Narcan. You know, Narcan used to be only used by fire rescue, and it was such a limited basis because we didn't have many overdoses. Mm-hmm. Narcan basically reverses that the opioid overdose symptoms, lack of breathing. That's the primary cause of death, right? They quit breathing, they can't get oxygen, they die. That's what happens. Well, the opioids, the Narcan counteract the action of those opioids. So as a result, they did a very effective job. Well, fentanyl started becoming more and more prevalent, and so now they've made it available to the general public. In fact, we even have a program here in Clay County where we give out free Narcan, and I participate in, they have a conference every, I think it's once a month or so that we do, and they go over the stats, and they've given out, I think it's 1,800 doses of Narcan. Every case we work, when we get an informant that's in an opioid-based organization, basically fentanyl, every one of them talks about how many people they've saved by CPR and by administering Narcan. So the numbers would be astronomically higher were it not for Narcan being readily available. And I mean, it's one of those unknowns. You don't know how bad would it be. It'd be bad. Mm-hmm. Jacksonville right now is averaging a little over 1 a day deaths. So we've only had 20. So if you think about that, half the year's gone, 40 in the year. Mm-hmm. So we're significantly lower. A lot of that's just due to our response time of emergency rescue people. But it's very significant, and Narcan is definitely a lifesaver. And I encourage anybody listening, if you have a family member or a friend that partakes in that type of drug, don't be embarrassed. Go down, get some Narcan, have it on hand, know how to use it. They'll show you where they distribute it, and it could save somebody's life.
And be honest with you, I actually, not only do I have Narcan in my patrol car, but I also keep it in my personal car. Now, for my personal car, I mean, unless someone really need it, I'll be honest with you. I use it in case, I go somewhere with my family and one of us passes out and we have no unknown reason why. Mm-hmm. Well, if I have Narcan around, I'm not saying none of my family is on, my kids are, not on drugs. But the reality is you don't know where you may go. I just saw a news story the other night where it was a restaurant where some people went and eat and they got sick and they had to come shut it down because apparently there was meth or fentanyl in the sauce and some unused packets that weren't open. So, and they're trying to determine how it got there, got in those packets, whatever the case may be. So that's scary because you go sit somewhere and you just pass out, or someone just passes out, and it could be a heart attack. Right. It could, you don't know. But my first fear is, all right, well, you know what? Narcan is not going to hurt you, even if it's a heart attack situation. But my first response, get you some help. I have Narcan. My family, I'm gonna hit them with Narcan just in case it is an issue. I want to make sure that I'm ready, and that's just me personally.
Yeah, that's true, and that's exactly a perfect example of why I encourage everyone who thinks they might ever be exposed to it to get a container of it, have it ready to go, know how to use it. It's very simple. It's not a shot. It's a nasal spray. It's similar to something you would use for allergies.
So, like, could I go down and ask for some?
Just
say,
go get a box. They'll give them to you.
Okay.
Yeah, sure will.
Yeah, same reason, I guess. That's the
Keep it in your car.
Keep it in car in case. Well, it's a scary world we live in, and you know, it's almost like, and again, you've been in the game long enough to comment on this. It seems like the narcotics world. Yeah, narcotics were bad. Always, they're bad. They're bad. They ruin lives. They're horrible. We know that. But it's like if you look back at the '80s versus what's going on now, it's like you've gone from like petty crime to serial killer level of seriousness. And as far as the results of the drug,
it's true. I mean, these people are killing people. In fact, a lot of our informants that go and talk to these people when they're buying drugs, they'll say, "Be careful, this stuff is killing people. I killed 3 last week." It's almost a point of bragging. They're like, "This is how strong my stuff is. It'll kill you, so be careful. Have somebody with you."
Can they? I mean, is it? Because I don't know what statutes this fall under. Can they charge somebody with murder?
Sure.
Okay, good.
So I'll talk about that very briefly. It's difficult. It's very difficult because these people oftentimes don't use one source. They use multiple sources. Electronic devices have aided us greatly in determining who sold the drugs that killed this or that person. In the last 6 months, we have actually arrested 2 for manslaughter, both of them for overdoses related to fentanyl, where the individual that sold them the fentanyl and delivered it to them and they used it and then passed away were arrested and charged with manslaughter. So that's 2 out of 40, if you think about it like that. So it's a very difficult case. We got an incredible investigator that does a good job on that, really digs deep. The investigations are so detailed, and they're very interesting because of how he puts everything together. It tells like a movie. It's a very interesting presentation he does when he arrests somebody.
Wow.
So he's good at what he does.
Is that something that a law change on the state level could help, where they could say, change the statutes that say if you're dealing and it's responsible in death, it's a death row or whatever it is.
That's exactly what the law says, basically. If you deal drugs and it results in the death, you can be charged.
Right.
And the problem is proving who actually sold the drugs.
Okay.
You know, half the time you're my dealer, I call you, you send him, he brings me the drugs, you never leave. So when we look to see where you are, you're on video at a Walmart in Orange Park, and I bought the drugs down south of Green Cove. Well, it couldn't be you that sold it, even though you organized and orchestrated
it.
We got to try and figure out how to get him, and we never catch you.
Right.
So it's difficult to get the big guy. A lot of times we get the smaller people, but they are the ones that sold the drugs to the person who overdosed.
Right.
And so they are responsible.
In fear of God, you hope that it gets on the street. Like, I mean, I'll be honest, from where I'm sitting, if, like I do railroad contract, if they go, if you have a derailment, you're going to, it's death penalty. My guys on the line are going to be like, well, yeah. I mean, there's going to be some trickle economics there of responsibility. But again, the problem is it's these, like you said, it's these young people. They're checked out. I mean, any young person does stupid things to start with, and they're going, it's not going to happen to me. It's not really going to happen to me. So even regardless of how severe the penalty is, it's going to take a long time before there's some real change, and there's other changes we have to do of stopping it getting here in the first place.
So I do have a question, because in Lieutenant Hall is because what should parents look out for, especially with school kids being out of school and then school getting ready to start back up? Because at least for me, and I tell my kids, I have 4. Two of them are still in school up in Philadelphia, and one's in high school, one's in middle school, and then my daughter and my 9-year-old down here with us, who's in elementary. And one of the things I tell them is, listen, don't accept food or anything from anyone now these days, because you don't know the environment that product came from. Even, I don't care if they're your friends or not, don't accept food, because the scary part is you don't know if it's laced with something, whether it has marijuana in it or fentanyl may have got. So what can you tell parents? What should they look out for children, middle school, high school? What are the things they need to look out for?
Well, there's a couple things. And the first thing I would say, the number one thing that I think a parent can do to prevent their involvement in narcotics and other criminal activity, don't let them have their cell phone when they go to bed. They sit up at night. I would bet you half of the problems with these younger kids getting into trouble after hours is because they're on their phone at 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and somebody entices them to come out and do something they shouldn't be doing, whether it's drugs or it's underage, sexual activities, or it's breaking in somewhere and getting drunk, or whatever it might be. If the parents pay more attention to those cell phones, that would be huge. That's the number one thing. Number two thing, insofar as actually drugs, just keep an eye on the way they react and the way they move. Fentanyl, number one, is it will make them very obviously slower moving. They will be very lethargic. They'll want to sleep all the time,
which is hard for a teenager because you're seeing that
pretty
anyway.
High strung, yeah.
Well, I mean, I remember, my goodness, when I was a teenager,
sleeping, yeah.
I'm like, what? You want me to get up at 8? This is horrible. Now I'm like up at 5 and I'm going to bed at midnight. It doesn't affect me. I'm
right. I think more and more kids, and I don't have kids of my own, but I'm just going off of cases that we've been involved with. More and more kids feel like they have this total right to privacy in their bedroom, total right to privacy on their phone. And parents, they don't want to be mean to their kids. They want to give their kids everything they can, so they go so far that the kid has total anonymity to do anything they want without any oversight. And that's what causes the problem. You got to check in on your kids. Make sure they're in bed every once in a while. Just glance in on them. Make sure they're there. Make sure their phone stays out in the living room plugged in at night. That kind of thing. If you see them doing things they shouldn't be doing, you have to jump right on it. Don't overlook it and say they're just being kids, because the kids of yesteryear, we might jump out, go skinny dipping in somebody's pool, but anymore they're jumping out, going out and pulling door handles on cars.
Right. And
now they get arrested and it's a felony and it sticks with them the rest of their life.
Or if you go skinny dipping in somebody's pool nowadays, you're probably
even that. I mean, you're right.
I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, because they arrested somebody for nude swimming at the beach, and I'm like, I didn't do that, but there was some night swimming going on back in high school, and little things like that. The level of what we just, it changed. Times have changed.
Sure,
it has changed, and you're right about your kids. The reality is, if your kids are like, I hate you for doing this, they're probably doing something that they shouldn't have been doing that makes them hate you for taking that away. Now, look, if you're being a jerk, parents can be jerks too.
Right.
But if you're being reasonable and they're really flipping out about it, there's probably a reason they wanted to get away with something that you're preventing. So
so listen, as an SRO in the school, several years ago, had a parent come to me who had a student. He said we were asleep. I walked past my child's room and saw kind of a small light on, and went in there and saw that they were on their phone. And when Dad checked the phone and the computer, what he found was unimaginable. And so, and of course, I'm not going to say names or reveal genders, but Dad came to me as the SRO and says, Deputy Ford, I don't know what to do, but this is what I found on my child's computer. And this child was sending pics to some other person who was in high school, and so those are the scary things when you see, because there's another side to investigating, and I didn't mean to get off the drug topics, but when we're talking about monitoring your kids,
right,
there's another side to investigating, sexual exploitation or child pornography. And then the reality is, not only just for law enforcement alone, you have to remember there are some law enforcement officers, those who get a case where they have to, investigate, they have to see those pictures of that victim that they're now physically talking to. And you think in your mind, I have a daughter, I have a son, I have a child, and it's horrifying. And so just imagine for the investigators who do a great job, but they also have, to deal with doing that investigation, looking at those pictures. So yes, parents need to be mindful, check on your child, make sure they don't have their phones late at night, because those are the things you don't want to happen.
Well, and I know we'll wrap up the first segment here really quickly, but I do know, so I because of Facebook and Twitter and all that, I read stories about the moderators, and that's something that the moderators were like, we would like to be able to talk to somebody because of some of the stuff that we had to see to take down.
Sure.
And they're like, the sad part is, if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's horrible, but no, you don't understand it. Whatever you're thinking, they've seen things 100 times
Yeah,
worse.
and I'll elaborate on that briefly. We here at the sheriff's office, the norm is twice a year they go see a counselor and they talk about these things to make sure that their mind is not running askew on them. Here at the sheriff's office, we do it a little more than that. We do it 4 times a year. So 4 times a year, the investigators that look at these photos on a regular basis, and it's daily, they go in and they talk and they make sure everything's okay at home, that things aren't bleeding over and there's not, a problem brewing. So I think that's very significant. You got to take care of your people. To touch on what you said about how horrific, these are not videos of young girls in bikinis with their tops off or something like that. These are so horrific, without going into details. I mean, it's videos of young children crying while they're being put in pain during these sex acts with multiple adults. I mean, it's bad. It's very, and I'm talking, when I say young, 3, 5, 7, Jesus. 8, 10, very young.
I mean, it's horrible anyways. It's disgusting. It's just horrible.
It is.
And I want the listeners to understand, remember, you've got a layer of protection in our county and other places around the United States. And there's people that have to deal with that every day. So remember that too. Especially, we're lucky here. We talk about this all the time. We have a great community that supports law enforcement. But for those that you don't remember that extra layer of protection and what they have to go through to keep your kids safe.
And listen, and in reality, we just, there was a gentleman wanted out of Texas, top 10, who it was a probation violation, but he was wanted for, inducing, a minor, and he violated probation and was hiding out in Clay County. And so he was just arrested. And
Glad you got him.
And he's sitting in jail waiting for extradition back to Texas. So one thing we will say is that, I think as a whole, Clay County Sheriff's Office and all the law enforcement agencies, is something that we take seriously. Mm-hmm. Don't think that you can, be in this county and get away with it. You can just look at recent articles, recent posts that we post on subjects who were, in Clay County. And listen, they may have gotten arrested, or, they may have did something where it was picked up by another law enforcement agency. Don't think that you're not going to come, that you're going to be able to hide out in Clay County and do your misdeeds, somewhere else. You will get caught and you will go to jail.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I will ask the snake question. So for those of you who've heard me ask it 1,000 times, one day I'm going to get the answer I want. No, I'll use it. This will be my definitive, no, it doesn't happen moment. So you're listening to Never Off Duty. Okay, we are back to Never Off Duty. Little housekeeping. Remember to subscribe. If you like the show, you can share it. Very important. Lots of ways to listen to the show. Lots of different venues. You can go to the sheriff's website,
claysheriff.com.
Man, what is going on today? I feel like for the last couple of episodes when y'all haven't been here, I've been nailing it. I've been getting the email address right. And sheriff at claysheriff.com. If you have questions, if it's a podcast question, you should put podcast in the title. Always, if you can, in the subject, helps get it to the right person quickly. I guess really also housekeeping. Safer Watch is another way you could report something too. I finally downloaded the app. I will say be very careful on your filters when you download the app, because it will give you a lot if you want a lot of information, which is good.
Yes.
I'd rather have access to a lot of information and filter it down to what I need than be like, well, y'all aren't giving us information. You will get a lot of information. It's a very good app to use, so I would do that. Again, we are back with Deputy Ford and Lieutenant Hall, and I'll give you the snake question. So
let's hear it.
This is the Hollywood thing that's happened. I've seen this in movies, so I know the movies will do this. The drug dealer used to. Now it's different because obviously it's been in movies, so people won't do it. Maybe that's why the answer is always no, this doesn't exist. So they would have a snake cage, like a python or rattlesnake, some weird snake, and they would hide their drugs in the bottom of the snake pit because it masks the smell, and also who's going to stick their hand in a rattlesnake cage to grab the whatever drug they're selling under there. Have you ever seen this or heard about it?
I'm going to say that's partially true.
Oh, okay.
It's not with snakes,
okay,
but with dogs.
Okay.
So we have had a couple cases where dogs have been tied up in the backyard and drugs were buried in the backyard. One of them, we were conducting a search warrant, and an informant told us it was there in the backyard buried by the dog. We did not believe him. We brought him back to the house. He pointed to it. We dug, and there was a pelican case with 3 kilos of fentanyl in it.
Wow.
And and that was the dog, but he was not a snake. So the answer is no snakes, dogs, yes.
So maybe in Miami, where snakes are more prevalent, pythons
don't have yards.
But you know what? I guess the question would be, because are there a lot of drug dealers who know how to handle rattlesnakes or pythons?
No.
So then you can. How will you get your own supply?
I think it just looks cool in movies.
Right.
The guy, you come in and they've got like this like venomous snake, and the guy's not afraid of it. He just goes in there and grabs whatever he's going to sell. So yeah, I recognize that. But I do also, we're talking about the police dogs and in there, the idea for a person doing bad would be to try to mask the set and try to make it more difficult. But remember, they can be there as long as it takes to search. I mean, it's
got all day.
Yeah. It almost seems like, I mean, honestly, I hate to say this, but I think a reasonable person, now these aren't reasonable people, but if you come in with a warrant and you know it's there, you might as well just go, I'm going to show you because I don't want my place destroyed.
Well, you know what? But you know what? Be honest with you, because I had a dealer say to me one time, but this was off a traffic stop, and it said, "Man, you gonna make us dig around just to?" It took us 45 minutes. You could have just told us where. He said, "Listen, y'all got a job to do. I got a job to do."
That's right.
So in reality, you know what? If you're gonna catch me, then you're gonna have to work for it. And you accept that. Yeah.
Well, there used to be a show called To Catch a Thief, and it was 2 ex-cons that did a show about how breaking into people's houses to try to help people secure their house. And what is amazing, and I think this is, y'all have probably seen this, wherever you think you're going to hide something, they know. Like, trust me, if you thought this is genius, somebody else has already done it, and that's the first place they look. It's just like, I mean, seriously. I mean, that's what they were saying. They're like, oh yeah, it's going to be. We know there's something in here. It's probably here. It's like, oh, it's going to be. I bet you it's behind one of these outlets. Like, because they think, who's going to take the time to unscrew an outlet, and then like 4 outlets later, like, yep, there's that Rolex we were looking for. Again, it's like, you're not smarter than the system. I'm sorry.
You're not. So true funny story is when I went to a house searching for something when I first started in my career as law enforcement, and when I got into the house was infested with roaches.
Oh man!
I mean, listen, it wasn't a place you could turn or look where it wasn't a roach crawling somewhere. From the front door to the kitchen to the upstairs. And, we're in there, looking and searching. And at this point, I'm just like, you know what? I don't even want to check nowhere else. I'm done. I just want to get out of this house because I don't want to take.
You won this round. We'll get you later.
I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to carry a roach home or any other type of varmint that wasn't supposed to be that wasn't supposed to go home with me. So back in the day, you may have won. I think one person won with that one.
Well, I actually did think about that. The probably the person who's got the most likely chance is like the hoarder. Who it's just, you go in there.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, it's just too much. Well, and that's what, to be fair, that's what politicians do. I mean, if a president gets a subpoena, they give the Justice Department 20 trillion emails and go, all right, yeah, find what you want.
Go through all those.
Yeah, have fun. I'll be out of office and dead before you get done. And I'm not joking. That is an actual tactic that corporations do it. Mm-hmm. They go, okay, yeah, we're going to cooperate.
Give them the whole gamut.
Give you every single thing because it does. It gets harder. Now, AI is changing that. Let's be clear. Yes. That tactic's not going to work forever because you can scan mass amounts of data now a lot easier with AI. So that's that. All right. Well, how did you get started? Let's ask that. We'll get this back to you.
In law enforcement
Yes.
in general? Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting story. My whole family were police. I say my whole family. I have 2 uncles and 3 cousins that were JSO. And so early on when I graduated high school, I moved to North Carolina and helped my uncle with a business. Anyhow, I got into some trouble up there. I actually got arrested for buying alcohol underage.
Not you.
Underage. I was 20, and anyhow,
you just got caught.
I got caught.
You got caught. Yeah, there's you do realize there's a billion people listening that are like, yeah, that could have been me.
That could have been me, right?
So I remember I woke up one day, because I was a heavy drinker back then. I was 21, 22 years old. I said, I got to get out of this. I woke up with another hangover. I felt like hell. And so I said, I'm moving to Florida and be a policeman. Well, all my friends up there were laughing. They were like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. You know, all these things you do and you're going to become a police. I said, I'm done with it. And I walked away from it, moved to Florida where my family were all policemen. And they helped me get on with JSO as a bailiff. And so I worked there as a bailiff for a little bit and then eventually put myself through the academy and then got hired by Green Coat PD a few years later. So I've been in touch with a few of them. 2 of them are dead, one by overdose.
Wow.
And one of them, I still don't know how he died. But he died in his sleep, possibly overdose too, because he was a pretty heavy abuser of substances. But I look back on that time as I had a great time, but luckily I got out.
Right.
I just walked away. I just literally gave up everything and moved to Florida. And sometimes, you know, parents think that a lot of times with their kids, he's just in a bad crowd. He needs to get away from them. Sometimes it's true, but the kids never want to do it. And you have to have that presence of mind to say, it's time to grow up and move on. And that's what I did. And so I started with Green Coat PD, and I've always had an interest in the drug world because I was loosely associated with it as a civilian in my youth. And so I had a lot of knowledge on operations and how things happen, and I knew what to look for on the street, so to speak. And I knew kind of how people did business, and so I was pretty good at it. And it just developed from there.
Wow. That's I think we hear this story a lot, is usually a lot of law enforcement, you have people that different experience in their youth and decided to do something good with their lives. And then you have a lot of people or their family member and it kind of drove them, or they had, unfortunately, some other tragedy happen to them. You see a lot of that.
Some of those life experiences, especially for those who actually really do come into this profession wanting to do good and help. Those life experience that you see, whether you grew up in an inner city or, you know, in a rural area, you know, or you were affected with family members, or you yourself used to get in trouble and get arrested, but nothing that prevented you to go into the law enforcement side. Because let's be honest, you have that street knowledge. And that can be very beneficial, you know, in this profession. We always talk about, you know, you want your smartest, you want your brightest, you know, but your smartest and your brightest could also be those who actually know the streets.
Yes,
well, you know?
Absolutely. That common sense knowledge of actually having lived it is extremely valuable. It just is. And you're seeing that in the corporate world too. You're seeing, it used to, for the past 20 years, everything was about what's your highest education? What's your highest education? Now everybody's going, what have you done? I don't care. Like, we don't need a college education. Yeah. You've done this. That's much more valuable.
You know, I'm sitting there, I talk to my wife, and she, you know, works background in HR for Citi. And she says to me, Citi, and most of these corporations now, you know, they'll take the person with experience, who's been in the field, who doesn't have a degree, even if they were doing this for 5-6 years, over the person with the degree.
Yeah, because it used not to be like that.
Yes,
it used to be the exact reverse, where experience doesn't count for much. You got to have that degree, and it was very frustrating for people who, like myself. I don't have a college degree. Now I have some college classes. I feel like I'm a fairly intelligent guy, but I have the life experiences that none of those guys with college could have gotten, because if they would, they couldn't have made it through college.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely. No, it's so true. And I would rather hire a person that, if I'm talking to a person and they're like, yeah, no, I skipped college, but I was doing this as a side hustle and this, and then I'm like, I'm sitting here going, all right, yeah, you're a go-getter. I get it. It's
work ethic. You're not afraid to work hard. Not saying that those who went to college aren't afraid to work hard. But you work hard. You already showed you got work ethic and you got drive and determination. Right. And again, with the experience, you know, you're willing to put yourself out there.
And you can teach technical skills. I mean, the reality is, the days of having to have, like, I can do Excel on your resume, or first of all, if you're under a certain age, you probably just naturally know how to do it because you grew up doing stupid stuff that required it. But even then, it's like I can give you a 2-hour class and you're going to be good.
Hey, I took Excel for Dummies, when I got hired with CSX because I had to do some Excel sheets.
Yeah.
So I took it and learned how to do it. So
my CFO still hates me with Excel. So she's like, really? How did you mess this formula up? I'm like, I hate it. I know how to use it, but I'm like, I'm not an expert.
Right. Well, somebody else put the formula in, but I'll create the graph
exactly
for you all day long.
But I mean, it's a different time, and obviously, I think we'll segue into really quickly because speaking of, Clay County Sheriff's Office is still hiring.
Sure,
it's a great opportunity if you're listening and interested or know somebody to tell them, put an application in, see where it goes. Because
go to our website, it's claysheriff.com. You'll see right up there, join CCSO. If you go to our social media page, Facebook, we have a Facebook page that says join CCSO, and you'll get to talk to our recruiter, Will Smith and Cedric McGowan, who are two great recruiters who can give you a lot of information on what you need in the process.
Now with narcotics and the other, now obviously the online stuff, that's a completely different thing because there's some horrible things here. But is that something like, do y'all ever have like people like thinking of getting a job there and they're like, can they come in and follow y'all for a day? Or is that like, nah, this is too,
Sure. Well, at the sheriff's office, part of the training is they kind of float around in training. They go spend a day with investigators doing this or doing that or doing this. So anyone who expresses an interest, and typically I'll talk to the new recruit classes and I'll tell them what we do. And I'll say, listen, if you have an interest in narcotics, here's what you got to do for the first couple of years. Do these kinds of things. Look for it. Send us information. Get your name on the radar with us, and then come over and work with us a couple days. And so they do that. And they go with investigations. They go with sex crimes. They go with or SVU, and they come to narcotics, and they go to different areas. They go to dispatch. So all our trainees kind of get exposed briefly to that.
Which I love. I think that is the
great
smartest way to do everything because you never know where somebody's talent is, and you never know when you need somebody to step up when they've already kind of experienced it.
Right. Right. I know it's interesting. I was talking to a lieutenant a while back, and this was a lieutenant who was very book smart, known as a very intelligent guy. And we were talking about drugs, and he's like, I've been a policeman 17 years. I've never found cocaine. And I'm like, what? I said, I average twice a week. I catch somebody with cocaine. He goes, how is that possible? It's not out there. I said, it's out there. You have to know where to look.
Yes.
And so those people with that innate skill or ability and knowledge of that guy's not right, something's wrong, and they dig. Mm-hmm. Those are the guys that, that we want. And generally speaking, that goes through all of investigations. If you think about it, not just the drug world. We want people who have a natural ability to say, he's not telling the truth. There's something over here. I need to look at that. And they make good policemen. Typically, athletes make good policemen too because they have that self motivation to do well and strive to be the best, to be a good athlete or to keep themselves in shape. And as a result, that transfers directly over into law enforcement. I likened it to playing on a football team when I first started because it's a team. Mm-hmm. We're the A team, they're the B team. We got to catch them. And so it was such a fun time being a young policeman when I was in great shape, foot chases and all that stuff. Yeah. It was a great time, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
You live for the foot pursuit.
You live it.
You live for the foot pursuit.
Not that I could catch many of them, but I could keep them in sight till somebody caught them.
Yeah, there's a gentleman that I was having dinner with last night, and he used to be with Clay County Sheriff, and older gentleman now, and he was saying that when he started, it was right after one of the wars, and you had a lot of military people that were kind of the end of the. He goes, I was out of shape, and suddenly they wanted to get serious about He's like, I'm done. I'm not getting in shape.
Well, you look long for. Listen, 9/11, then air marshals. Everybody everybody wanted to go to the air marshals, and you had to do so much. Law enforcement, when you first come in this game, you really do need to be in shape.
Yes,
because where you're going is on the street on patrol, and when you get out there, the reality is you're going to have to chase somebody. You hope that's not the case, but let's just be honest. It's going to happen. You may have to physically fight someone, in order to get them into custody. It's going to happen. So coming into this profession, you need to be in some form. I don't care how big you are. You can still be big and be in shape. And still be able to run.
I've seen huge people that can sprint way faster than I
listen,
can.
We got some big guys on this agency, and I don't mean that that can move. And don't think they can't, because they can't.
Well, we've seen it on Sunday. Suddenly an offensive lineman, you're going, wow, that guy just got down the field. Exactly. Now, he needed oxygen afterwards, of course. But he got the job done. That's what's important. So I guess in closing, one, is there anything you'd like to bring up? We got a little time. I just wanted to...
No, not a whole lot. I would just, again, like to encourage anyone who has any issues with a individual in their family experiencing problems with drugs, please you can contact the narcotics office, and we can give you more information about some resources that are available. As far as your children, do what you can to protect them. Cell phones are the number one problem. Keep an eye on them. Look at their cell phones. That's part of the deal. You get a cell phone, I get to look at it. You just need to establish that early on. Check their rooms once in a while. Make sure they're where they say they're going. If they're going to Timmy's house for the night, call over there at 10 o'clock. Are they there? Yep. Okay, great. You got to check on them.
I encourage this at my school because I'm one of the, not a parent ambassador. My wife's the head of the association, so I go to a lot of these meetings. I always tell the parents, I'm like, especially when you're in first grade or whatever, because it's easier to do then, like make friends with the other parents because you were stuck with them till they graduate. You might not be their friends, but you're going to be going to a ton of events with them, especially younger. Make those friendships now at those birthday parties so that when they're teenagers, you can call and be like, hey, my son Willard's going over. Is this real? Like, yeah, tell me. Right. Form that so you're comfortable calling and communicating. It all comes back to family. We're all family units. We have our family that's our real family. Then we have our extended family, which are friends and our community. The more comfortable you are with everybody else and feel like you can communicate, the safer we can keep everybody. So,
sure.
Sorry to hijack that.
No worries. No worries. You covered it very well, and that's all I've really got as far as that goes. Our sheriff is very proactive insofar as supporting family and the family unit and encouraging those families to participate in their children's activities, and so I encourage that too. I think they are the future. I mean, it sounds cheesy to say that, but it's the truth.
But it's true.
And if we don't look out for them, then what's going to be left by the time we're ready to get wheeled around in a wheelchair, walking with a cane?
Yeah. That's right. Deputy Ford, anything you closing?
I just, again, anybody have any questions? They can email sheriff@claysheriff.com. Title it podcast, and you can ask your questions. Anyone looking to join the sheriff's office, you think you want a job in law enforcement, it just work. claysheriff.com, join CCSO, click on the link, join CCSO. And as always, just, you see a law enforcement officer, just, give them a shout out, say thank you, or just give them a thumbs up. Yeah.
And they are doing a lot. Again, I cannot imagine the amount of times I've seen CCSO and Green Cove Springs Police Department, Orange Park Police Department, they do a great job too. I want to give them some props because you'll be driving around the community and y'all are doing something that's not in your job description. Good.
All the time.
I see that 1,000 times more than I see y'all having to do something, like do your job like you want to do, protect us.
I do want to touch I know we're short on time, but very briefly, I want to basically thank the community for supporting us because the fact of the matter is the support we see in this community for our law enforcement efforts are unlike any other area. Jacksonville does not have the support we have, and these other cities don't. Some of the rural ones may, but I know it's good here. I can't tell you when I was in uniform how many times a week in my work week people will come up and thank me. It was on a daily basis when I would walk into places. And so I think we have a very strong relationship with our community, and that shows it's a result of the hard work and going the extra mile, like you said, for the community. So that's what we try to do.
And thank you for your service. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, you're listening to Never Off Duty. Hope to have you back and get somebody else from your team on here. That would be awesome. I think everybody loves to hear about that. And tune in to the next episode. Thank you.